Doctor, can we start?
Yeah, definitely. We can start.
Yes. So, namaste and good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
I am excited to welcome all of you, and especially Professor Dr. Aruna Yadyal, to this edition of Monday evening Zoom meeting. NIMHANS Bangalore has a geriatrics unit specializing in treating seniors with mental health conditions. The unit is functioning for more than 25 years. Vayomanasa Sanjeevani is an unique brand that functions under the geriatric unit of NIMHANS, and through the initiative of Professor and Head of Department Dr. P.T. Sivakumar, and with the able support of Professor and Dr. Vijay Kumar Hebishettar and other doctors in the geriatric units of NIMHANS, these Monday webinars meetings are brought to you with the support of students in the department. The webinars are on topic of relevance to seniors for their general guidance. The resource persons are specialists in the concerned field. The unique feature of these meetings are that they are totally non-commercial in nature, and they do not promote any product, nor do they endorse any brand. All the people involved in these webinars are doing it as volunteers and do not get any material benefit from these webinars. The advantage for seniors is that they can listen to it from the convenience of their homes through Zoom and YouTube platform. This evening, we are blessed with a brief knowledge sharing session by Dr. Aruna Yadyal, MD, on the very relevant topic of grief and its management in elderly. I once again welcome Dr. Aruna. I also welcome Mrs. Fatima and her team, who are students in NIMHANS and are providing back-end support for the webinar. As many of you know, I am Jambunathan, a volunteer with Geriatrics unit of NIMHANS. Dr. Aruna Yadyal has qualified for her MBBS degree from Vijayanagara Institute of Medical Science, Bellary, in the year 2003. She had completed her MD from Father Muller Medical College, Bangalore, with specialization in psychiatry in 2008. Dr. Aruna has many academic achievements to her credit. I share some of them. She was a student in Father Muller Medical College, that is affiliated to the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Science, for her MD course. She has secured university first rank in the MD examination in the year 2008. She has secured the Best Outgoing Student of the Year award and Sri Katil Appupai Award by the Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter for the year 2008. Besides her academic achievements, she has secured several awards and recognitions for her contribution to the mental health and education and practices from the Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter, namely S.S. Jairam Award for Work in Mental Health Awareness for the year 2016. The Indian Medical Association Karnataka chapter has awarded Dr. Sunanda Kulkarni Award for the year 2023 for her book on child mental health. She has held and continues to hold several positions in the various associations connected with psychiatry and mental health, like Women Mental Health Subcommittees, LGBT Task Force, etc. Currently, she is chairperson of Women Empowerment Cell, Samvani, in Indian Psychiatry Society South Zonal Branch. She is currently working as the Professor and Head of Department of Psychiatry, Father Muller Medical College, Bangalore. To sum up, if you like to understand Dr. Aruna Yadyal in one sentence, she is a doctor by default, a psychiatrist by choice, and a writer by passion. I thank her on behalf of all of you for joining with us this evening to spend her valuable time and share her wide knowledge on a highly relevant topic, namely grief and its management in elderly. As far as today's topic is concerned, American Psychiatrists Association defines grief as the emotional response to a loss which can be real, perceived, or anticipated. It can be a reaction to the death of a loved one, a serious illness, a divorce, or other significant loss. Grief can also be experienced when something disrupts one's sense of normalcy or challenges a person, such as the loss of a job, financial stability, or a dream. It is a broad definition and encompasses many situations people experience at times. Grief has different reactions for different age groups. Let us today understand from Dr. Aruna the ways in which grief affects seniors and the way and means through which they can cope with such situations. As you are aware, our resource persons are well educated and trained and offer evidence-based possible solutions so that anecdotal information is totally avoided. However, kindly note that these information shared in these meetings are general in nature, and for any specific matter connected with your health, please consult your medical practitioner and take treatment as suggested. In today's meeting, we are following question and answer response pattern. As such, I shall raise certain questions that will be replied to by the resource person. As a meeting hygiene, I request all participants to keep their mic in mute. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat window for the speaker to respond at the end of the presentation. If time permits, you can raise direct questions to her to respond. Dr. Madam, let me introduce the group. We are a set of mostly serious, keen in healthy aging for us as well as for the society. With this objective, we listen to experts like you, apply your advices in our daily life, and share the knowledge we gain with our dear and near so that everyone ages in a healthy way. Yes, doctor, the floor is open to you. Kindly permit me to raise my questions so that you can respond. Thank you, doctor.
Time for also to interact at the end.
Can we go, doctor?
Online meeting.
Can we go ahead, doctor?
Yes, we can proceed. We can proceed.
Yeah. Doctor, I have given a very brief introduction. For introducing itself, I need a session. I know that. But see, we have given just for the information of our valued, people who are in the webinar, I have given a brief introduction about you. This is a very, very important topic that we understand. The topic that we are going, because grief is something that every one of us experience at some point of time or other. Therefore, can you just tell me how common is grief in elderly?
When we talk grief, we should understand.
Kindly mute everyone. Everyone, please mute everyone. Please.
Yes, sir.
You go ahead, please.
Am I audible?
You are.
At the onset, I would first like to thank VMS and NIMHANS unit, Geriatric unit for having me here. It's my pleasure too that I can share whatever I have learned till now with the audience. And pertaining to sir's question, is grief common in elderly, or how common is it? So when we speak of grief, it is first we have to understand that grief is not just sadness or depression or what occurs as a reaction to daily events. Grief has a more nuanced approach when it comes to everybody, not just elderly. So grief is not just depression. Grief is something that occurs as an emotional reaction when somebody is likely to lose a loved one at some age or the other. And it affects elderly a little bit differently, we can say. And it is also, we have to understand that it is influenced in different ways by the culture and the ethnicity surrounding them, and also by the societal context. And it's not just after a loss of loved one, it can occur after loss of other. Will be specifying later on as the talk progresses. And how common is it? We have to understand that as much as we live longer, that is, elderly people are called elderly for a reason. They are after a certain age, like after 65 or 70, we tend to lifespan, they are more likely to experience more of other things in life which they miss terribly. So as the more longer they live or the more longevity they experience, it is, we can say that grief or because that is when they
just one minute. See, mute. I request all the speaker people to be on mute, sir. Please mute yourself. Mute. So, madam, you come along, but just please, ma'am, please.
So in the elderly age group, as the longevity of the person increases, probably they are more likely to be exposed to grief. So when compared to other age groups, probably the exposure to grief and the incidence of grief and grief reactions might be more in elderly. Seeing to that the events of loss are also more in the elderly age group.
Oh, thank you, doctor. Thank you. That helps. This incidence is more in the elderly age group. I see. Thank you, doctor. How does grief manifest in the elderly, doctor?
That is another question. I think the relevant part is to be answered in a way that I said already that, grief manifests in different ways. And it's not just influenced by the individual, but is also influenced by the society or cultural constructs that surround him, of what level of spiritual inclination the person has, or how he has come to see birth and death in all these years. All these kind of philosophical things also weigh in when they react to grief. So it is not one way that they react to grief. It might manifest in different ways. First comes, it may be in a very emotional response where there is initial disbelief, shock, turning towards anger, more sadness, depression, the kind of helplessness, despair, some feeling of isolation, some feeling of yearning for the lost one. And sometimes, in a few cases, there might be relief also. Like they couldn't see the suffering of the person who was terminally ill, and when they die, they feel a sense of relief also. That is one of the emotional responses we expect from the elderly also during the grief period. The second part is the physical symptoms. It might manifest physically also in a way of sleep disturbances, insomnia, hypersomnia sometimes, with a lot of vivid dreams involving the object of loss. Or there might be loss of appetite, changes in food habits, changes in bowel and bladder habits, a lot of anxiety-related physical symptoms like palpitations, sweating, choking kind of sensations, panic attacks, those kind of things. A lot of lethargy or inactivity previously not seen in the person might also set in and look like physical symptoms rather than grief reaction. There might be a lot of confusion, and that might be related to their change in eating habits and sleep habits, and daily routine habits might change, and it may lead to a lot of confusion also. Of course, secondary to the emotional response and the physical response, there is something called the behavioral response also, by which grief manifests. So there might be difficulty in focusing, difficulty in problem solving, taking decisions. Even minor decisions might be difficult to take. And for minor reasons, they may appear very emotional and tearful. And they may appear, they may go into wrong coping mechanisms, risk-taking behavior might start. So these might be the behavioral consequences. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross initially told of some 5 stages of grief, which follows in a method like initially there is shock, then there is denial, then there is anger, then there is kind of depression, and then so these not clear happen in the
ಈ ಮಗು ಸೆಟ್ ಐತೆ ತಾಯಿ ಸೆಟ್ ಐತೆ ತಲೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಗಿಡದ ಮೇಲೆ ಈ FHS ಅಂತ ಹೋಗಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅವರು 64 ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ.
Yes, doctor. Go ahead.
So these stages of grief, which usually is being described by Kubler-Ross, it need not happen in the same way or in the same, stages or in the same pattern also. It may happen in a very disarrayed pattern, especially in the elderly. They may show atypical behaviors also. Something like behavioral symptoms like irritability, not taking care of themselves, going into neglect, or some people may even resort to violent behavior among their family members, a kind of social apathy and withdrawal, going into substance use, having suicidal thoughts, which may become a little bit of complicated grief kind of symptoms, but it doesn't happen in everybody. So it happens in a few people. So if you want to put it in a nutshell, it can manifest in different ways. It is influenced by culture and society around. It is also influenced by the individual's characteristic patterns, their education pattern, their level of spiritual inclination, philosophical understanding of birth and death, these concepts, how much they have accepted and anticipated the death. And also, it also kind of manifests in 3 different aspects, let us say, like emotional response or physical response or behavioral response also.
Yes, doctor. That means that their day-to-day life is totally affected, isn't it, doctor? Isn't it? Can we raise in simple forms? Can that they are not able to cope with their day-to-day life in the way in which normally they cope with.
Especially the initial few days of their loss, they find it really difficult to adjust to the new reality.
Yes, doctor. Thank you, doctor. That helps. That helps me. That helps very much, doctor. Then, what is? I mean, is there anything known as complicated grief or anything like that? Is that anything simple grief or complicated grief or anything like that?
Definitely. See, grief, when we say that, we have to accept that whatever is born has to die someday. And elderly have already accepted that fact when compared to the other age group. The other age group might be, not even thinking about death, and they may be so much immersed in material things of the world that they might not even think of death and its consequences. But it's not the same for elderly. They have already seen a lot of deaths. They have seen their loved ones losing loved ones. So they already are kind of prepared for it. In spite of that, so the reaction to a loss of loved one, what we call as bereavement or grief, is considered normal. It's not pathological. If somebody sad after the loss of their loved one, of a partner of 40 years, we don't consider that as normal. But when does it become abnormal? That is the question there. Feeling sad after the loss of a loved one is considered normal. So when does it become a complicated grief? From a normal grief or from expected grief reaction, around 10% of elderly people might experience this complicated grief. So it might be a prolonged, if the grief doesn't contain itself along with time. They say that it's the magic healer there. So you give them time, they do recover from grief. But what happens if they don't recover? After 6 months also, if they are not recovering, it is called prolonged grief. That might be one of the features of complicated grief. And sometimes it is, even though the grief period is less, it might be characterized by very intense and persevering symptoms. The symptoms might be so severe that it may sometimes require hospitalization. Sometimes it may disrupt their daily living patterns. They might not be able to do their daily routine activities. And in the elderly, especially, this complicated grief will manifest as something that they can't recover from the loss that they are experiencing, either mentally or physically also. And there is a unexplainable difficulty in accepting the loss that they have faced. And for them, the life seems very purposeless then on, and they just lose the will to live, go on living anymore without the loved one's presence, and they start avoiding reminders. There might be a group of people in complicated grief where they go into psychotic symptoms also. They may start hearing the voice of the loved ones that they are lost, start seeing their images, start hallucinating about their presence in their life, go into a shock or a denial kind of syndrome very easily. And that might result in some kind of abnormal responses, like willing to, a kind of suicidal ideas or suicidal attempts, sometimes leading to physical symptoms also. And it might lead to a lot of stress, and that might take a toll on the mental health of the person also. Not only just mental health, even the physical health of the person or the elderly might get affected. See, they might not report with the emotional responses or emotional problem or psychological problem. Suddenly their BP shoots up, suddenly their diabetes goes off out of control. They might be meeting the general physician rather than the psychiatrist. So it is up to the general physician to pick up these signs as stress related and grief related, and probably they need help psychologically also, because they might not tap into the correct treatment area for that also sometimes, because it may manifest differently also.
So from the manifestation, the doctor has to identify that you need not only physical problem, you have mental issues also. Therefore, he has to refer him to a psychologist as well. Thank you, doctor. See, what are the consequences if grief is left unaddressed in the elderly or untreated? See, suppose
Be kind of a stressor that the person might not be able to handle it on his own. If they are, they have already, anticipated the death, they might have coping in them already ready, and they might be resilient, come out of it, especially if they have a good family, near and dear ones surrounding them, they usually recover from it. Actually, after 85 years old, they are set to cope with grief more than the younger age group. But sometimes what happens is, if they don't cope with this grief in an efficient, in a correct way, they may coping techniques and end up with more problems. Sometimes it can affect the person's physical health, can affect their relationship with others. It can also, disarray or disentangle their daily responsibilities or not make them go their role of in daily and into a kind of high risk behavior where they go into substance abuse, some violence, sometimes even changes in sleep habits, neglecting their medications, neglecting their food, not taking care of their body, or they don't care about the life ahead of them. Sometimes a high risk behavior like self harm, these kind of things might also result in that. There is also studies which show that there is increased rate of cerebrovascular accidents, increased rates of carcinoma, sleep disorders, all these kind of things might happen in the grief period itself. So there might be a little bit increased incidence of cerebrovascular accidents also, a form of little bit of cognitive dysfunction where they don't take are affected. They may not be able to solve the problems or problem solving on a daily basis, decision making on a daily basis, reflexes on a daily basis might get affected when grief strikes them. And it can also lead to psychiatric problems like anxiety disorders, depression, fatality to suicidal ideas and plans and acts if it is not in a correct way.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you. Cerebrovascular. Can you just explain a little more on that, doctor?
Cerebrovascular includes all that involves the brain, the blood circulation surrounding it. So it may involve involving having as minor as a thing like an angina, like chest pain, or it may progress to a heart attack, or it may result in a stroke kind of thing, especially if they go into substance use. If they are being moderate drinkers and during the grief period, if they find find a wrong coping method and go into more of alcohol abuse or tobacco abuse, these kind of things can result and have a domino effect kind of thing on their physical health also. And we all know that grief is a recognizable stress in the elderly age group, and that might increase some stress hormones also like cortisol, and those kind of things might increase, which has a direct effect on the hypothalamic pituitary axis of the people. So that might also result in some derangement of management of chronic diseases that they already have, like diabetes, hypertension, earlier cerebrovascular events, ischemia, these kind of things, and that may get exacerbated if the grief is not addressed on time.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you. Therefore, it's essential that we are able to identify that grief, and at least people around us should be able to identify grief and organize a proper treatment for that. Thanks, doctor. See, what are the different variants of, what is pathological grief and what are the different variants of that, doctor?
Earlier you told about complicated grief. A variant of that is pathological grief, because all grief is not pathological. That is what we have to understand. See, when somebody dies and the died person or the dead person is a loved one, grief for them is, kind of a normal reaction. You can't tell that it is abnormal. So when does it become pathological? When it crosses the duration that is expected for a normal grief. Let us say even after 6 months, the person is not able to get over the loss. Maybe then that becomes pathological. When there are presence of psychotic symptoms, not just emotional reaction. You're not just feeling sad for the person who has died, but you have started hearing his voices. You have started believing that he is not dead. He's there living somewhere and you have to go join him. Or you're starting to believe having some paranoid ideas like, he didn't die a natural death, otherwise this wouldn't have happened to me. I would have accepted it. Somebody killed him. I have to find out that somebody. So these kind of, suspicions or hallucinations or some perceptual abnormalities, that is presence of psychotic symptoms, or when it is very intense and severe to the extent that person just forgets to even groom himself, go to bathroom, or they don't have the will to live anything longer. Severe depression or catatonic kind of symptom, the loss of will to live. Maybe probably these are also when the symptoms are very, very severe, when they find it difficult to recover, when it is carrying on for a longer time, more than usual, prolonged grief, when there is presence of psychotic symptoms, when there is harm to self and to others. So these are features of pathological grief, and there are different variants. One is a chronic grief when it goes on beyond a 6 months period, sometimes more than 1 year, sometimes 2 years. It may go on forever, like chronic grief. There is no break. They were not able to get it and accept it also. Next is the delayed grief, because initially when all the funeral rituals are happening, when family members are surrounding, they may not manifest any features of this grief. But once everybody leaves them and goes back to their work, when they are feeling that loneliness that suddenly hits them, and after a period of almost 1 month and all, they may experience this grief in a very intense way, and there is nobody to even acknowledge that they are undergoing grief, or they have nobody to share it with them. So this is kind of called as a delayed grief also. Sometimes there is something called in pathological grief or complicated grief, something called exaggerated grief, where the nature of the grief is much more than what we expect. What we say as like the features of grief are much more intense than what we expect in a normal grief. And there might be something called masked reaction or masked grief, which might be very common in elderly. See, the elderly have always thought of themselves as role models or exemplary models for the younger generation. So they don't feel comfortable crying in front of everybody or complaining that my wife has died. Now who will look after me? Those insecurities, just like a child will tell it to you, they can't tell it, because they have always projected that image of being strong and resilient and being the wisdom givers and people who are giving comfort to others in the family. So when suddenly that grief hits them, it's very difficult for them to not relate to anybody and keep bottled up. And sometimes this grief goes into masked grief, where they try to hide their feelings and they try to show that nothing has happened. So that might have a negative effect, or it can take a negative toll on their mental health in the long run also.
Oh, thank you, doctor. Thank you. See, okay. Then, so then how to manage? See, this kind of a thing has happened to somebody. How is that he can manage that grief? How to manage this grief down?
One thing is, we have to understand that as much as possible, we have to spend time with them. That is a request to the family members and the immediate caregivers who are surrounding them. Spend as much time with the person. Also give the person some time to recover from their grief. You can't expect that a person has lost a loved one just the day before and you ask them, cheer up man, it is nothing great, everybody dies. So these kind of insensitive statements have to be avoided. Everybody's loss is a loss to them. So they may take some time to recover. You can't expect them to be back to normal, back to cheerful when they are, in that suffering period. Everybody reacts differently to loss in their own way. So we have to give some time and space for them to recover on their own also. And also we have to talk about the loss. So many people in India, they don't talk about death even before the death and after the death also. They try to avoid it. It becomes kind of kind of elephant in the room. We know clearly why the person is sad, but we don't speak about the person who is dead, or we don't speak about the loss or the grief, or we don't speak about death at all. So that might lead to a kind of you're ignoring the main thing in the room and beating around the bush. That might not help in the long run. And sometimes what we have to do is, we may have to point out the changes in their behavior. Like, suppose, let us say, a pious person for all these years has been getting up at a certain time, doing the puja, doing the rituals, picking up the flowers from the garden. He has a routine of his own. Suppose the loss of a loved one leads to the loss of routine, and the whole day he is refusing to get up from bed, refusing to eat. Family members can't just let it go and tell that he will take his time to come out of grief. So, let us leave it like that. So you may have to point out and tell that you are not doing the things you are supposed to do. Get back, try to this. We understand you, but at the same time, there are some things which you are supposed to do. Let us start doing it. So those things also might be there, and the family members or immediate caregivers have to watch out for some signs of clinical depression, where there is changes in sleep patterns, changes in the eating patterns, or drastic loss or gain of weight, or if they are going into substance use. So that requires clinical psychiatric treatment. So these signs of depression and anxiety, these kind of things have to be watched for by the family members. Also, you have to encourage them to share their feelings. And if you feel that it is more intense than what you have expected, or there are some presence of complicated grief or psychotic symptoms is carrying on for long, you should encourage them to seek professional help, because not all might be solvable by the family members alone. And also try to keep them engaged. If you give them a role or a responsibility, usually they will do it slowly and try to be engaged in that. It distracts them from their feeling of misery or feeling of loneliness that they have been experiencing, and make their daily routine a little bit more easy. If they are finding it, a person who has had a wife for 50 years, might the wife might be taking care of him in a very nice way, like in a motherly way, keeping his handkerchief ready, keeping his mobile ready, reminding him of everything. So having a help which does that all that physical work and makes the physical work or daily routine easy for the person might make the blow a little bit lesser for him. So that is also there. And maybe suggesting activities that they enjoy. They can tell that you used to like to go to the park and meet friends. Why don't you do that? Because they shouldn't be feeling guilty that, my wife has died. How can I go and enjoy? How can I go to Raghavendra Matha and return, enjoy the Kirtana there because my wife is dead? There is nothing wrong in doing what they love, even after the person is dead. So people have to encourage and tell that you used to like it. So why don't you go and try that again? And try to be open and supportive to them whenever possible, rather than hiding the facts or not speaking about the issue or brushing it under the carpet. We can be supportive to them and in a very open and communicative way is what I feel.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you. But the more often the problem comes because people normally nowadays stay alone. In most of the cases, what is happening is that the boy or the girl, or they have for their own purposes, they have gone away from them. They are in a different city or in a different country, etc., etc. In that situation, only the person who loses the spouse, mostly the spouse are losing. I think it gets into some serious issues. And the most often we have come across one thing known as widower grief. So rather than the widow grief, it is the widower grief. That is a serious this thing. Okay, doctor, that gives you, okay, in such a situation, are there any self-help tips that you can think of, doctor?
Definitely. See, people who have been living alone, I suggest them that before itself, they should try to become independent in three ways. Now, one is, of course, physical independence. You try to get from point A to point B, try to do all your physical activities. Try not to depend on anybody else, even it may be your own spouse of 40 years, 50 years, or children. Try not to be physically dependent on them. Second thing is financial stability. That also it can be achieved if you plan ahead and have a retirement plan. The third is the most difficult one, but it is possible if you practice it on a daily basis, and that is called emotional independence. So the once we give the remote control of our feelings and emotions in other people's hand and tell that if that person behaves in a certain way, I'm happy. If he's not behaving in a certain way, I become sad, angry, whatever the reactions come, then naturally the expectation on the other person and how they are not looking after us might be more painful for the person than the grief itself. So I tell them that your happiness and your health is your responsibility. So once they try to understand that, they will stop blaming the other person for their happiness. He's not keeping me happy. He's not there to look after me. So these kind of expectations will come down. And that will make them self-reliant in ways that they can look after themselves even during the period of grief. So there are 3 steps that they suggest for self-help or what they can do for themselves, not the family members, not the doctor or the professional team. They can choose, connect and communicate. The first thing is to choose is what's best for you. See, sometimes just changing the living arrangements makes a lot of difference. Till now, as you said, they are living with the spouse, they are okay, they are independent. Right now, they don't have anybody. So if the children tell that we can't come there, but can you come here? We will look after you. I have seen scores of elderly being very rigid and telling that, no, I will not leave my home. I will die in my home. Yes, that might be a wish that the children wish to respect, but it might not be practical at all. For a person to leave their career of 20, 30 years in their prime and leave everything and come back might affect the next generation also. So they have kids, their own kids to look after and think about, and economic stability, all these kind of things will come into the picture. So instead of being that cognitively rigid, if they can have a mindset of choosing what is best for them, I'm totally not telling that they should leave everything and go and live with their children. That is up to them. If they think that living alone is best, that is what they should choose. If they think that it is best to go and stay in the daughter's house, I have heard many people tell that, how can I go and stay in the daughter's house? It's not right, no. So I tell them that that is not what, you shouldn't think about society or what will the society say, these kind of things. If you feel comfortable, if the daughter feels comfortable looking after the person in her home, in her habitat, probably that cognitive flexibility should be there. And going into a retired home or assisted help, that is not a bad thing. See, it has a very bad stigma in India where, oh, he put his parents in retirement home, old age home, he's not looking after his parents. There is nothing like that. If you go into retirement home, they tend to meet their age peers a lot. There are a lot of activities which suits those age group activities. So it's not a bad idea. So sometimes they will have to take a decision practically also, not just emotionally or what the society thinks and all. So first they have to choose what's best for them and then go about it. The second thing is connection. That is they have to connect with family members, friends and community. And for that, it doesn't happen overnight. They have to build a safety net of community outside, which helps in situations of grief and stress over a lifetime period. They have to be there for others so that others are there for them. So that building relationships and having a connect with family or friends or community makes a huge difference during the coping of grief also. And next is communicate. Talk about your feelings. Try think that it is healthy to share your feelings and share fond memories of the person lost. See, there are many people who tell me that she has been with me for 50 years. How do I forget her? I ask them, who told you to forget her? Who told you to forget? Nobody is asking you to forget. We are asking you to remember them in a fond way. Don't remember them with tears, because that is not what the dead person wanted also. So remember them with fond memories. She used to give me coffee like this. She used to do that. She used to comment like this when I did like this. Right? You can always remember them in a very fond way. The people are dead in just a physical sense. They are living in your memories. So I don't think that should be discouraged. You should encourage them to share their fond memories and make them live. The memory should live in them forever. So these kind of choose, connect and communicate. These might be the pillars of self-care for grief in the elderly.
So thank you, doctor. So that helps. So that, I mean, you become, right at the beginning, you become well connected with people. That is the first step, I think. I mean, when you are connected with others, they help you and you also help them. Thank you, doctor. So therefore, we need to be socially connected with people. We should not be independent or we should not be separated from others. And there is no point in being only with your family. You get socially connected also. That's a very good point, doctor. Thank you. Then, is there any do's and don'ts while dealing with grief, doctor?
I told a lot of already, so I will go with the don'ts, what we shouldn't do.
Yes, please.
Avoid doing. So one thing is we should not let them go on living in the past. When she was there, it was like this. When he was there, it was like this. So that is past. Past is dead already. So the yesterday is not already there. So what we have to try to make them is focus on the here and now. Tell me what you're going to do today, what you're enjoying today. So, try to get them back to the present day, because present is a present. It's called present for a reason. It's a gift. So that today we have to use it and use it. We have to make focus our mind to live in the present, in the here and the now, and try not to over idealize or romanticize the death of the loved one. Oh, he was excellent. He was the best person. Nobody is best person. He might be best for you, but he did come with flaws. They did come with flaws. So the goodest person might be looking like a villain to others. So, it gets into argument kind of thing where, like, why are you telling wrong things? Why are you falsifying it? So falsification and glorification of memories is a very common thing that we see in the elderly. They might not appreciate the person when living, but when dead, he becomes suddenly very good and very ideal. So those kind of over idealizations might also need to be checked in and avoided. And maybe we have to more necessary changes what are needed once a loved person goes. That might have to be reinforced a little bit. So do not refuse to make the necessary changes that is needed. Something like holding on to clothes. That cupboard needs to be emptied, or the things that are not used by him on a daily basis, that has to be emptied. It may give a lot of pain. How can you throw the daily, the daily wear that person was wearing? So holding on to it will become more of an emotional burden. So the necessary changes that follow somebody's death, maybe change of a home, change of a city, change of a country sometimes even, or change of a location might be needed, and do not stick to the past so much that moving on becomes very difficult. And do not dwell in self-pity, this happened to me, that will happen to everybody. Everybody on earth has to follow, has to experience grief one or the other time. There is nobody who can tell that, I didn't experience grief. There is a tale in Buddhist tales where Kisa Gautami was asked by Gautam Buddha, bring the mustard seeds from the house that didn't have death. So that applies to everybody, even to elderly. So you can't dwell in self-pity and tell that I lost my wife for 50 years. The other person who has lost it 30 years will be feeling like my wife left me at 30 years. So come on. So, it is not a contest anymore that who is more pitiable or something. So we shouldn't dwell in self-pity. In fact, we should remember them with fondness. And do not lose respect for your body and your routine which has been happening, because that will not stop living just because the loved one is gone. So all that we do for our body on a daily basis, eating, sleeping, grooming, taking care of our hygiene, exercise, medications, all this has to continue, and that is a reason. There is a reason for that to continue also. And do not be withdrawn or go or run away from the feelings. Try to share your feelings is what I would suggest. And do not go into wrong coping techniques like substance abuse, violence, domestic violence, getting irritable on others, taking high risk behavior. These kind of things are not expected, and do not have very much high expectations from the family. They might be your immediate family, but they might not relate to the death of the loved one as much as you relate. So if you see a one generation ahead, grandchildren will be still putting earphones and they will be there in their own world even when the grandparent is dead. So it is not like that they don't love their granddad or grandmother. Sometimes the distance between the generations becomes so much that the same kind of grief is not expected from each and every family member. And do not resent the family members and interaction with them also. And don't feel guilty about feeling happy or, feeling pleasurable at certain events after the death of the person. You shouldn't feel that, how can I feel happy? She's dead. I shouldn't be feeling happy. So these kind of things are not to be encouraged. You have a right to feel happy. You have a right to live nicely. So it doesn't mean that just because you have lost a loved one, you should be, permanently sad or something like that. And do not condemn yourself or blame yourself, telling that had I taken to the doctor, it wouldn't have happened. When death happens, it happens. So not everything is preventable. So you have done your best looking after her in whatever way you can. So you should be able to solace yourself and comfort yourself, telling that you did what was best at that time. So instead of going into a cycle of guilt and blaming yourself, condemning yourself, that is not to be done. And you have to go into a little bit of self-care mode also.
Thank you, Doctor. Before I go to the last question of the day, I have got one more question to ask. Before that, many people have raised questions, and there are some remarks in the chat box also, Doctor. We will just go to that, then come back to the last question, Doctor. Is it okay, Doctor?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Doctor. So, I am just going to the chat box. Yes, one second. Tangaraja has asked. Tangaraja, I will definitely unmute him after taking this question.
The doctor can also see and give her remark.
No, that is instead of doctor doing it, sir, I am just reading the question so that doctor can answer. Why should we burden her? Creation and prevalence in all reactions of people are when a grief situations. Family members have to be vigilant. Seeing a loved one is sad mind. Counseling is necessary. That is one suggestion he has given. Another suggestion he has given is, one second. He has got one more question. Speaking with friends is important to solve the issues in mind. Loneliness to be avoided. That is one more suggestion he has given. And the last suggestion he has given is, one lady had deserted her husband within a few months after marriage. The family consisting of son, husband, parents have decided to end the life day before yesterday. Nobody has knowledge about this. That is, he's just quoting one incident. Sir, you have got something to say, sir? Please unmute yourself, sir. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jambanathan. Doctor has told about living with the daughter's home or son's home like that. One section. But our customs are not willing to accommodate the father or mother in daughter's home. Most of the people are neglecting. They are only in the search of properties, share and other things, money and other things. But in-laws are not accepting our people. Self-respect is coming to avoid to go to a daughter's home. This is prevalent in almost all religions and caste, etc. The people will say Hindus are like that, very, very affectionate words are spreading nowadays. But nobody will look after the people in need. That is my opinion. We have to live our own, either with the help of a son or daughter financially. Whenever they face time, whenever they feel, they can come and meet parents. And likewise, grandchildren are also studying, they are concentrating. They are not able in the joint family system. Nowadays, they are living with their parents. They have no time to speak with the grandparents. This is the current situation. This is my opinion.
That is true, sir. But okay, doctor, what is doctor's response for this?
As I told, there are two options. One is you try to live independently, not just independent physically, financially, and emotionally. That way, you don't have to blame others for not taking care of you if you are capable of taking care of yourself. So, the first thing that you have to realize is health and happiness is your responsibility. There is no other person responsible for it. So, you have to make yourself self-reliant in giving yourself health and happiness. Yes, there are a lot of other practical options. Going for a retirement home, or saving money to go to a retirement home where you can meet lot of people of your age, be happy there. But what comes against it is the stigma. My son is not looking after me. That is why he has put me in an old age home. What will society say? Society is not coming here to help you. Actually, you should turn to society to there. There is nothing very sad about living in a retirement home or an old age home. That is our concept or our mindset. We made it a rule that we have to live with our children. So what about those people who only have daughters? So I tell them, if you have grown your daughters just like sons, given them the freedom, the economic thing, you go and live with them. There is no problem. If they don't have a problem, you shouldn't be having a problem. Telling that our customs don't allow it. Society has to change along with the custom. See, earlier times, everybody used to have 7, 8 children. They used to have daughters, they used to have sons. Now, if they have only one single child, and that is a daughter, and that person is doing very well in her life, but she just can't leave everything and come to your home and look after you. But she's asking you to come to her home. So what is wrong in going and staying? And you say that in-laws were not allowing those kind of things. It all leads to adjustment. Aren't in-laws human beings? It is how you look after them. And there, I know of several homes where the in-laws and other party are living together. In fact, my mother lives with me. So it is not, she has 3 daughters and all the daughters are doing well. There is a competition between us who wants to look after mommy. So it is not like everywhere it is like that. So after my father expired, my mummy is living with me. So it is not a concept that is, out of India or it's a Western concept. It's all about practicality trumping emotionality. So if you stick to customs, you are harming yourself. And yes, you should give value to society and traditions and all, but not till it becomes impossible for everybody to come and help you. So if you are not into that, if you are very rigid and tell that, no, I can't go into my daughter's house and stay there and upset her life and all, then you should practice from an earlier time itself. See, the realization that you have one daughter and you will not be able to stay with her didn't come today. It has been there since the time she is born. So if you have taken that decision mentally, I think you should train yourself to become so independent, even emotionally, even mentally, so that you take care of yourself, so that the resentment and the blaming part or the expectation on others is very less, so that you stay happy wherever you are. So it doesn't have to matter where you stay. It is about the mindset of how you accept the surrounding people and stay happy with them.
Increasing old age home nowadays. What is the reason?
And it is not a bad thing if you see that.
So the very, very
Then
wrong in that. See, in fact, doctors, right from the beginning, doctor has been very clearly telling that going to a old age home or going to a retirement colony at the appropriate time is not at all a bad idea. I think that we need to tell this to, spread this concept to people. I think one take-home message from this today's session is that, from the senior psychiatrist doctor is saying that. It's not a, if I say that, okay, you are obsessed. But she is saying, this is nothing wrong. In fact, even for Dr. Chandrasekhar also, he always used to say that this is the old age homes are necessities of the day. See, like you have for the children, you have got crutch. The old age home is for the seniors. Therefore, nothing wrong in that. I think we need to educate our sons and daughters for that. In fact, I would say that we buy a old age home and tell our son and daughter, I use it when you need it. I'm just bequeathing it to you. Therefore, you use it when you need it. I think this is one of the take-home messages of this day, doctor, isn't it?
Yes, it is prevalent in Nanani, Coimbatore.
Yeah.
Not
Very
just telling a very concept. It is very much.
I don't want to take any name here, but one thing is that yes, there are many homes like that. I think this is one concept that we need to take it today. Sir, doctor, shall we go to the next person? Nagarajan has asked this. Which
1 minute.
comes first? Is it grief or stress?
It is also there in our ancient scriptures where after the Grihastha Ashrama and all, they tell something like Vanaprastha. It is telling you that you have to leave the bachelor, after the bachelorhood comes the Grihastha Ashrama and then the Vanaprastha. And that meant that it was there, that concept was there in our olden times also. In our customs, it was built that you leave everything and go into the forest. And here, there are no forest to go to. So what they're trying to tell you is, you can detach yourself and go to a forest, you go there and you surround yourself with peace and quiet. It might be anywhere. It might be a retirement home.
ನೀವು 7-seater ಸರ್ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಏನೋ 4-seater ದಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೀರಿ ನಾವು. KSRTC ಬಸ್ ಡ್ರೈವರ್ 42-seater ಓಡಿಸ್ತಾನೆ.
Doctor, next question is from Nagaraj Rao. See, he is asking, which comes first? Is it grief or stress? So
I think it depends on the context actually. If the death is already anticipated, like let us say the person is suffering from a terminal illness and his death is evident. So it is going on stretching for 2-3 months and all. There is something called anticipated grief. So the grief they would have already experienced, and then comes the stress of when the person actually dies. But if it is not like that, if it is sudden, then probably the grief comes first, and following that, grief is a form of stress. That is what I would like to say. It is a stressor, and that induces stress later on also. Grief is a form of stress itself. Stress, not all stress is grief, but all grief can be stressful. So that is how we would put it. We couldn't, separate it like that categorically or something.
Sir, would you like to ask her anything, doctor? Anything, sir?
So I've asked 2 more questions. Doctor is the final authority to advise us. 2 more questions. Any human organ connected with the grief, like heart with the jealousy, compassion, love, like that, is there any organ of the human connected with grief?
The mind is connected with grief. That is what we can say. And mind is not a physical organ. Mind is a function of the brain. So, when I ask you to locate the mind, where will you locate it? Some people will say like this, some people will show their heart. So, mind is not something that can be located physically. That is something, the function of the brain or the verb of the brain is probably the mind. So the grief and what the love we feel about the person dead, that is residing as a function of the brain. So if you want me to put it into an organ, it would be brain rather than the heart.
Okay. He has also one more question. Would the process of detachment as a result of yoga lessen the grief? I think doctor has spoken about it. Yes. Would
For inclined, and that happens to be a part of yoga also. Yoga is not just a series of physical exercises or doing asanas and physical poses and all. It also requires a kind of mental detachment. And when I say detachment, it is not that you should stop loving the person who has died just because they are not there. I tell them that make the love a positive thing. So, you don't have to forget them, but try to associate positive memories with the loved one. That way, it will be useful to you also, and you will not be remembering every time you remember the person. It shouldn't be with sadness. It should be with some amount of happiness also. Not happy because they are dead, but happy because they gave you a lot of happy memories when they were living. So that kind of detachment should come. You should also think that death was good to her, probably. Death was good for that person. He couldn't go on living in that body, suffering torture and all. So, that was good to them. It was not good to us, probably, because we are selfish and want them for more time. But that is okay. It might have been a relief or a kind of freedom or liberation for them. So that is how we have to see death at the end of the day, and probably adjust with the grief, telling that it is better that I didn't put her to grief, that she put me through. So, I have seen many people accept that. When I ask them, do you want it to be the other way around? They say, no, it is better that she has gone and I experience this pain. I wouldn't want my wife to experience this pain. So, you can make them realize that the other part of it might have been more painful.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Doctor. See, then when Mr. Ganesh has asked one more question. He has asked, one second, how to cope with grief? Do we need external support for the same, or himself can manage? Do we need any professional grief cope up process?
There is something called grief focused therapy also, but as I said, not all grief is pathological. Some of it is physiological and is expected. So if you have a good family support and loved people surrounding you, I don't think you will require extra help. Suppose it goes into complicated grief, suppose you go into wrong coping techniques, suppose some psychotic symptoms arise, suppose harm to self or other people arise, that is when you will have to step up and seek professional help. Definitely professional help is available. Some medications are there to manage the emotional reactions. There is something called psychotherapy, grief focused psychotherapy, group therapy, where you meet other people in the same boat as yours. So that all support, and with the time is the best healer. You give them time, usually everybody recovers from grief. So that also might help them. So, there is professional help out there, but not everybody is required to go through grief therapy to come out of grief. It happens as a natural phenomenon also.
Oh, that's great, Doctor. See,
Thank
that
you.
can wait for some time and try to settle. The person on grief can, of his own accord, come out of the grief by following the various processes that you have to very kindly explain, Doctor. Doctor, because in view of the limited time, I'm just going to the last question. Any take-home message on grief and its management, Doctor? What's your final take-home message?
That thing that death, the only thing that is promised during your birth is your death. So that part we will have to get it right sometime. So I think in all those years of living till the age of elderly, I think we should get that one wisdom part right. And having said that, we have to understand that death is certain and the grief associated with certain. And grief is not always bad. Grief is the price we pay for the love of the we have loved one. So that is the price we pay for the love that we have loved. So I don't tell that you will have to, brush it under the carpet. Let the process be. Let you grieve or let you mourn the person whom you have lost. But do try to remember the person with fond memories. Try to, laugh at what they would have said, these kind of things. I never ask any person to forget the person that they have lost. You have to remember them with love. That is the, take home message. And instead of being a emotional burden or emotional mess for everybody else, I think we should try to be happy and healthy on our own, so that we recover even from this great stress called grief. And that is something that the elderly can practice on their own also.
So these self-help mechanisms are available, and if one can use it very, usefully, or get into that even when they are, even before that period. And a daily practice, I think some has to start that I have to get connected with people. Let me not live as, island life. So once that happens, I think any situation can be managed. And if necessary, help is also available through physical, through, through doctor's help, through self-process, etc., etc. So that helps us, doctor. So, I mean, I'm just because I am minding your time and I'm valuing your time, doctor. The time is already 5:05. Therefore, it is time that I 5:06. So it is time that I on behalf of all of you, see, as a return gift, what we can think is you are given as a gift of knowledge today, doctor. So by only return the gift, we can think of it that, okay, I, on behalf of myself and on all of us together, pray God to shower on you and your family, especially your mother, all that are the best in life, doctor.
Thank you, sir.
Continue to take care of your mother. We only wish that we have such daughters for us also. So therefore, our daughters are able to take care of ourselves. Thank you, doctor. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye. With your permission, I will close the meeting, doctor.
Definitely, sir. Definitely, sir.
So thank you. Thank you. So bye-bye to all. Thanks for joining the meeting. We'll meet again next week.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before that, I should also thank Doctor, which everyone has commented that it's a very good program. Thanks for that, sir. Thank you. Good day. Good day. Bye. Good evening.